Meet Elliott. He puts his pen down and feels a sharp turning in his stomach as he realizes the truth of his situation. Wow, he thinks. This is what she's not telling me. This is why I haven't been promoted. Earlier that day, Elliott had a 10-minute phone call with his director. After 3 years as a top-performing account executive, he's frustrated by the lack of opportunities to interview for a management position. His director explained that she appreciates his hard work, but there aren't any management positions available right now. He's heard that before, only to see new managers hired out of the blue. As the call ends, he thinks, what is she not telling me? To clear his mind, Elliott takes out a journal, starts reflecting on the past 3 years, his performance reviews, his feedback. He writes about how he started his position very strong. His first year, he was the top performer on his team. His work ethic, he believes, is what got him there. He would wake up early, stay on top of everything, follow up with every team member who was falling behind. His focus was on making the client happy, and he often felt that other people didn't care as much as he did. For instance, Kevin, the IT manager, would take days to reply to emails. Elliott had to follow up constantly, and when Kevin gave him an attitude, Elliott would give it right back. They even had a real heated exchange over Zoom, leading to feedback from the director. She encouraged Elliott to be more mindful of how he was communicating with other teams, and Elliott dismissed the advice, feeling like his approach was justified. Elliott's always been hard on himself, constantly striving to improve and getting frustrated if he didn't perform at the highest level. In his second year, he finished one spot behind an account executive in another region, and he couldn't stop obsessing about it. He was relentless in his third year, determined to regain his top spot, even if it means overstepping managers and reaching out to directors personally. His persistence paid off. He regained the top spot, but at what cost? As he reads through his journal, the realization hits him like a ton of bricks. Have I built a bad reputation here? Is the reason I'm not being promoted because I've been rubbing people the wrong way? Today, we'll discuss Elliott's situation with Sara Westbrook, a professional speaker and emotional resilience strategist. For over 15 years, Sara has provided professionals with strategies and resources to help them develop emotional awareness, leadership skills, and resilience. I'm excited to get Sara's take on what Elliott's going through and her recommendations to improve his emotional awareness, reputation, and chances of getting to the next level. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Sara, you're not only an accomplished professional speaker, you're also a singer-songwriter. And I heard you tell a story, and I'm going to ask you to tell this story if you're comfortable with it. It's a story of when you were 19 years old and you went on Canadian Idol, and it taught you a valuable lesson on perfection. Would you mind telling that story?
Okay, so I, like you said, was a singer-songwriter growing up, and there was this competition. So people kept talking about this competition. And every year I'd say, thanks, no thanks, I'm doing my own thing. By the third year, someone was like, Sara, you got to go in this competition. You might even win. I finally took a step back and I thought, well, why am I not going to this competition? Fear. Worried about, well, what if I don't do well? Then I'm going to be embarrassed. What will people think? And that was my fear growing up, because I had this idea of how I wanted to be perceived. And if I completely fall flat, or sing flat for that matter, then I'm going to feel so disappointed within myself. I decided that third year, though, that I was going to feel the fear and do it anyway. That I was just going to feel nervous and anxious and step into it and just go for it. So I went through 2 rounds of judges before you get in front of the celebrity judges. First round of judges said, great. Second round of judges, great. You're on to celebrity judges. Now I'm excited, Jay. I'm thinking, here we go. This could be my big break. And I'm standing in front of these celebrity judges, my shoulders back, my head held high. You know, I'm looking confident, but inside I feel shaky. And in that moment, if I made a choice out of feeling shaky and nervous, I would just run out the door and been like, forget it. But then I knew that later on, I would have been like, Sarah, come on, you let fear stop you from going after your dream, from just trying something, from leaning in. You're so afraid of failure that you can't just go for it. How will you ever know? So I took a deep breath and I told myself, you got this. Feel the fear, do it anyway. And I sang my song and I waited in intense, heart pounding silence for them to cut the silence. The judges cutting the silence with something along the lines of, oh my goodness, Sara Westbrook, that was amazing. Roll out the red carpet because you're definitely going to make it to the top 10. You know that record deal you've been dreaming about since you were little? That is so going to be yours. So I'm waiting for them to say something along these lines when all of a sudden what cuts the silence in the room in my mind is, you can't sing. Give up. You should do something else. And so I'm standing there thinking, give up, do something else. I've spent my whole year. Now I have to backtrack and say I was a paid performer since 11 years old. I've been recording albums and videos and singing at concerts. And so now you're saying I should just give up. It wasn't even constructive feedback. It wasn't like, oh, the one note was a little bit wonky, but we can help you. It was just do something else. And so then I was triggered to feel a lot of different emotions. There's the embarrassment and then sadness, but anger overwhelmed my body. I could feel my face going red. My heart was now racing. And in that moment, instead of reacting, which I knew they wanted, I mean, we've all seen those shows, right? That's what they want you to react, like poking the bear.
Right.
That makes good TV.
Right.
I told myself, bite your tongue, turn your body, and you walk out that room. And I walked out that room with my head held high. And I can hear the judges to this day whispering back and forth as I was leaving, saying, she didn't even give a reaction. And I had cameras following me and waiting for a reaction. My family was waiting outside. I'm like, don't speak, keep walking, do not talk, just walk.
Wow.
And so I got home and, you know, there was a wide range of emotions, anger, sadness, frustration, confusion. And out of those emotions, I just wanted to give up. I was like, forget it. Maybe they're right. Look I shouldn't have gone. After I took time and had a good scream into my pillow, good cry, vented to my mom, my friends, journaled, listened to sad music. Then I realized the next day, like, okay, so what? They get to decide what I become? They get to decide? Oh, they get the power? No. The worst case scenario out of this whole thing won't be that they said I can't sing. The worst case is going to be that I believe them.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's what became the start of me saying, okay, one foot in front of the other. What I decide matters more than their opinion. Now incorporating music as one of the ways that I connect with an audience when I'm doing a speaking event is pretty powerful that I never would have thought before. And sharing that story where I feel like there's an imperfection, I actually realize that's how you create connection. So those hard times and struggles can be the very place you learn and connect with people.
Yeah, and you just used a word that I know is important to you. Well, you said you decided. I hear you often use the word choice a lot. And I remember even a conversation you and I had a while ago where we talked about choice, how we have choice and how we respond to our emotions. We can't control everyone, but we can choose. how we respond. And I think that's very related to Elliott's story and how he's reacting to certain things and the choices either he's making or not making. So talk to me about choice. I mean, you talk about it in emotional resilience, you talk about it in emotional management. Tell me about the power of choice.
I do believe we don't have control over every single circumstance and everything that happens and everyone else's choices, their opinions, beliefs, and actions. We do, however, have control over how we respond, who we choose to become, how we choose to act, how we choose to react. And when I go back to even the Canadian Idol story, okay, so I didn't have control over them saying, you can't sing, give up. But I do have control over how I respond. Now, in that moment, I could have just responded out of anger, stormed out the room, told them where they need to improve in less kind ways. And sure, it would have felt good in the moment, but
Yeah.
later I would have been filled with guilt and regret because I would have responded in a way that's not in alignment with my character of who I believe I am and how I want to be remembered while I'm on this earth and well after I'm gone, which is someone who respects myself, someone who respects others and respects my dreams. And so when I look at choice, I say, okay, where am I going to make my choice from? My emotion of anger? Or am I going to notice my anger? Notice my face is going beet red, my heart's racing, my hands are now becoming fists or getting shaky. And I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to respond out of respect for myself, respect for others. And in doing that, I live in the moment, but I live in a way that I'm proud of for the moments to come.
Hmm.
And when I do react out of pure emotion and guilt sets in, I know the guilt has come from that I didn't make a choice that was in alignment with who I want to be, my character. And sometimes we all do that. And I think when you're talking about the story of Elliott, you hear that that is what he's doing. He feels justified in the fact that I'm going to react the way I'm going to react because I'm justified because I am, well, your brain's telling you I'm right. I'm right and you're wrong and I'm going to school you.
Yeah, and it's
Right.
something that we so often don't realize until later. And that's what happened in Elliott's story. He didn't realize it
Mhm.
until later. And I think that you showed a great deal of courage in how you handled those judges. I mean, that's not, I think, how most people would handle that. And it was a young age. You said you were only 19, and I know that you've only built up the faculty within yourself of choice since then. So that's a question that's on my mind. I wanted to gather from you is how does one do that? Like, how, for example, Elliot struggles to be able to even have the space to be able to choose his response. He's just reacting. So how do you advise people to build that up within themselves? What could they do? How could they become more aware of what their reaction may be, pause, and then choose a better response?
Mhm. It's definitely a skill. It's a muscle, and with a muscle needs exercise. So just like if I wanted huge biceps, I wouldn't just say to someone, "Well, how do I get huge biceps? How do I strengthen my bicep muscle?" And they'd say, "Well, you got to go to a gym and work out." And it'd be nice if you listen to some podcasts. Someone who motivates you on working out your muscle. But then if I just sat on the couch and I just thought about these things, it wouldn't be helpful. Right? You'd be
Right.
like, get to the gym. I said, you got to work out, pick up the weight and start doing curls. So I think the same is true when we talk about, okay, I want to be someone who makes choices that shows my values, my morals, my character, even in the face of anger and sadness and frustration. You can't just talk it and you can't just say it. You have to practice it. And I think one of the key exercises is, well, there's a few, but I'm going to start with this one. Create the end result of who you want to be as a person, just character based. So I'm not talking about the goals you want to achieve, the career you wish you had, the romance in your life. I'm not talking about those. I'm saying, what do you want for your character? What's your character end result? Do you want to be known as someone who's patient, compassionate, respectful? Someone might say, "Oh, well, you know what? Those ones don't matter to me as much as I want to be known as someone who is of integrity. I'm responsible. Now, all the character traits might matter to you, but I'm saying which is the one that if someone could remember you for,
Mm.
or the two that someone could remember you for, what would those be? And write them down and get really clear on what those are. I choose to be respectful and compassionate. All right. So
Mm.
if my mind knows that that's my end result, that allows me to backtrack and say, okay, how do I get there? Well, one of the ways that can impact your choice to be compassionate, to be respectful, be responsible, be of integrity, the biggest way, not just one, I'll say the biggest way is emotions. Emotions cloud character because in that moment, emotions can cloud your choice. That choice out of anger you make, it's not that you're not justified to feel angry. Maybe you are. You're justified to feel sadness and anger. But when you respond out of anger, if it's not in alignment with being compassionate, respectful to yourself and others, that's when true guilt and regret set in.
Mm.
When you're up in the middle of the night and you're like, 4 a.m., why are my eyes still open? Well, they're probably open because you regret something you said or did because it's not in alignment with your character. So the first step I would say is decide, what do you want to be remembered for? What character traits matter to you?
Yeah. We
And I have
can't.
many more steps.
But no, this first step's a powerful one because you can't align towards something that you haven't clearly defined. And what you're
Mhm.
saying is clearly define the target. Once you
Yes,
clearly
we do this
define
all
the
the
right,
time.
right. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was like, I get excited. I'm like, I was just gonna say for the listeners, like we do this all the time in games. You wouldn't play a game without knowing the end result. Even if someone's like, "Hey, what? Well, this is a brand new board game." You're like, "Okay, so hey, what? Blah blah blah. How do you win?"
Right.
Because we want to know the strategy. Right? We want to know that so we can backtrack. So we want to know the end result so we can backtrack and make strategy to get there.
Yeah, and that goes, of course, with character first and foremost. The way you're describing it, it also does apply with just goals in life, right? We wouldn't take off on a plane not knowing the destination that we're going to. That would be silly. We would be on this plane and we'd just be flying around in circles, not knowing the specific destination. But I love that you're referencing this and related to character as a means to be able to have more intention throughout the day of the ways in which you want to behave. Okay, so you said you had more steps. Now I got curious. I want to hear some of these other steps. What are some of these other steps that you'd recommend for Elliott or anyone else who feels like this is something that they are working through as well?
Yes, well, and yeah, for everyone, definitely Elliot in this story is working on your emotional awareness. So this is a huge skill for your brain. When you have emotions and you don't even know the name of the emotion, it becomes very easy to become reactive or to try to suppress it because emotions are not always comfortable. So you want them like to go away somehow. You're like, oh, no, I'm fine. 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 And then boom, you're like, okay, so I'm not fine. Or we've all seen that person that just they keep trying to avoid their emotion, but then it builds up and it's like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
They were so cool, calm, and collective, and then one little thing happens, and it's like,
Yeah.
right. I mean, us parents know that at kids at bedtime. We're like cool as a cucumber until it's like it's a final straw. But we want to check in with ourselves first. Check in. Say, okay, I'm starting to feel frustrated. And with Elliot, when he's having conversations, when he's hearing feedback, and it's triggering an emotion. Well, when you're aware of your emotion, when you name it, Dr. Dan Siegel coined a phrase, name it to tame it. He did a lot of research on emotional awareness, and he found through the research that when we can name an emotion, put a name to it. Yeah, I'm feeling frustrated. No, no, now I'm feeling angry. What it does is it gives your brain now information. Your brain loves information, it loves to problem solve. But when it doesn't even know what's going on because you just keep saying, I'm fine, and you're avoiding it and you're not even putting a name to it, it's very difficult for you to be able to even move with or through that emotion. So this is part of emotional intelligence. I mean, we all have emotions, whether we're comfortable with them or not. And other people have emotions and they can trigger emotions in us. So knowing how to be aware of the emotion is about naming it. And lots of people don't even have a strong emotional vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So getting stronger with that, like even as an adult, get a sheet. I created one where it's one of the products that I sell, or when I'm doing a corporate event that or any sort of event that I make it available to my audience. I call it the elephant in the room, and it's all elephant faces feeling a different emotion. And you get to look at it to help you identify the emotion. So this is super helpful for your brain. And then there's a step 2 in awareness is notice where you physically feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people will notice a physical impact before they even realize it's an emotion. Like think of how many times like your heart's racing, you're like, "Oh my gosh, is there something wrong with me? Like should I go to the hospital?" No, you could be just feeling anxious and it's causing your heart to race.
Right.
But you might
Well,
notice your heart racing before.
yeah. Well, when the phrase, when you name it, you tame it, makes a ton of sense, because the process of naming it suggests that you then are able to observe it. When you can
Mm,
observe it with detachment, then it no longer is something that's gripping you and fueling all of your actions. So the
love that.
process, yeah, the process of naming it does that for you
Mhm.
naturally. And one thing that I would love to hear you expand on, because you talk about it a lot and it's something that comes up with so many people I speak with, is the sense that in Elliott's story, he feels like he's not enough. I get that sense in reading his
Mhm.
story, because he
Mhm.
feels he has to keep proving himself. He has to keep being the top performer in his role. He finished second and it was something he obsessed over. He felt like
Mhm.
his life, everything was falling apart. He had to do everything to get back to his top spot. So when you are helping someone or speaking to audiences about that sense of I'm not enough, I have to keep proving myself, how do you advise people to work through that? Because I know it's something that so many people struggle with. They don't feel like they're
Mhm.
enough.
Mhm. So remember how I said about creating a character end result of how you want to be remembered?
Hmm.
You also have to do that for your own self. So if I say, okay, I want to be someone who's remembered as someone who's respectful, compassionate, that's not just outward, that's inward. So I have to make sure that the words I'm speaking to myself show respect and compassion, show love and support. Believing that you are enough does not mean you are saying, oh, well, I'm perfect and I can just become stagnant because I'm enough. No, I'm enough is that core belief in knowing that you are born worthy, period.
Yeah.
No, okay, here's an example. So if I attach my enoughness to what my outcome is with Canadian Idol, now I'm not enough.
Mm.
Now my self-esteem, my self-worth, my emotional state is just spiraling because I've needed them to say you're enough for me to believe I'm enough. I've attached my enoughness and my confidence to something outward that I do not have control over. As opposed to, no, I'm born worthy, and confidence comes from knowing that I like me, my imperfections, my quirkiness. Sometimes, Jay, I hit the mark, sometimes I completely misstep. I am not perfect, I'm perfectly imperfect, but I want to find people who like me for me. Not you like me, so I like me. No, no, no. It's I like me, so I find people who like me for me.
Mm.
And that starts that I am enough is just that solid worth, because when you don't believe you're enough, you are always trying to gain it somehow outwardly. But it's an
Yeah.
inside job.
Right.
And I had a rude
Anytime.
awakening of that.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
it was
Any.
an inside job.
Well, I think the problem so often people are falling into is this pattern of they've invested their worth, their sense of worth, in what other people say about them,
Hmm.
the job titles they have, the kind of money that they're making. And so when you've made that investment, then it's just a deck of cards. It's going to fall at some point because it's not a very
Mhm.
solid ground. It's based on something that you have absolutely, I don't want to say absolutely, but very little control over, right? To
Mhm.
say that, oh, I invest my sense of worth in my job. That's just an example. But they choose to let me go. They eliminate my role. Now, what am I? Who am I? And I just fall
Mhm.
into despair. And that's just not to say, and I'm sure you agree with this, Sarah. Like, if you do lose your job, or if a relationship comes to an end, or something happens, yes, it's disappointing. It's going to
Mhm.
create some disruptive emotion, as it did with you with Canadian Idol, but it doesn't have to be something that makes you fall into a terrible spiral of losing your worthiness.
Oh, exactly. So I think that is exactly it. The emotions are valid. You go
Right.
through your loss of a relationship or a job, there's grief, there's sadness, there's disappointment, there could be confusion, could be embarrassment, morphs into anger. That's all natural. So practice naming it, noticing where you feel it in your body, sitting in discomfort. Most people want to just avoid it. So sitting in it, like, oh my goodness, my heart's racing. I feel like I'm stomach ache because I notice it so that you can build confidence in that discomfort by moving through it in a healthy way, which is step number two or three. I'm not sure where we're at this point, but another step is emotional management, knowing how to manage your emotions in a healthy way. You know, we call this often self regulation. Sometimes we need to be co regulated because it's, being resilient is about tapping into that community. Sometimes you do have to reach out for help, put your pride and ego on the shelf and say, you know what? It takes a village, not just to raise a child, where we've heard that many times, and it's so true. It takes a village to do anything, support. And the emotions, that discomfort, sometimes that physical discomfort, is part of the journey. Life's not always going to be comfortable. Not everything's going to work your way. It's not about being happy all the time. That's unrealistic. But if
Yeah.
you have an end result in mind, if you're saying, okay, but I'm respectful, I'm compassionate to myself and others, that gives you a focal point, gives your brain a focal point as to what steps you're going to take. Doesn't mean that you don't spend a time crying and having a pity party, but you put a timeline on it. You put your timeline and you're like, okay, now I've got to like dust myself off. Or maybe I need help doing it. Maybe I
Yeah.
feel like I really need support doing this. But if I'm
Yeah.
being compassionate to myself, then even if I'm feeling embarrassed to ask for help, I'm going to notice that embarrassment, take a deep breath, and out of compassion for myself, I'm going to ask anyway. So it's just
Mhm.
what's going to end up leading your choice. Are you going to just make every choice out of emotions and stay stuck? Or you can honor the emotions and say, okay, this is part of the journey. You're part of this, but you don't get to drive. You don't get to drive on my choices. I want
Yeah.
my emotions to be a part of the journey because they are. Imagine if you never felt angry, you wouldn't make a change. Like, I mean, if you never felt anxious, you'd walk in front of moving buses. Like, we need these emotions,
Yeah.
but they don't need to be in the driver's seat of all the choices.
Yeah. It's something I often reference is the work by Kelly McGonigal. She has one of the most well-known TED Talks, and she reports on what Aaliyah Crumb's research about stress really, I think, created an incredible revelation about stress. And that is that when we do feel stress, it releases oxytocin, and therefore it is something that naturally would lead us to connect with others. As you were saying, reach out to people, socialize. That's a wonderful way to work through whatever is stress. But the other thing that she talks about is also how you don't stress about the things you don't care about. You stress about the things you care about. And
Mm,
without caring, you care about things, that's a positive thing. You
mhm,
want a meaningful life, yeah? Well, if you want a
mhm,
meaningful life, stress is going to be a part of it. And when I'm using stress here, I'm referring
mhm,
to any kind of internal emotional resistance. So that can be
mhm,
anxiety, frustration, whatever it is. So
mhm.
to not see it as, it's something that's bad, it's something I need to get rid of, like you were saying before. But if
Right.
anything, it's telling me here's something I care about. And how am I going to now interpret this in a way where I see my emotions as part of my team? It's
Well, they're
supporting me.
information.
Yeah.
Right, they're information. Emotions are information. They're telling you something. You can even use emotions as motivation. Ever
Yeah.
been so frustrated by something, but it motivated you to get to an end result? So I say, it's not about getting rid of the emotion. It's not, oh, I got to get rid of this so that I can be. No, it's all moving parts. So just noticing, being aware, naming it, being, oh, okay, no, I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable with this emotion. It's making my legs shake. Okay, so you're just tapping in, but you're remembering this is part of the journey, and this is part of the experience,
Yeah.
instead of, like you said, fighting it.
Yeah. One of the ways I work through that, I just thought I'd share this because I want to get your thoughts. When it comes up for me, uh, stress, fear, anxiety, I go, oh, it's like this now. Oh, it's like this now.
Oh,
In other
okay, I
words,
like
it's like
him.
just a deep acceptance
You're
of it. Oh, it's like,
noticing.
yeah, it's this is what it's like now. It's like this now. This is my experience now. As if to say, it's not like it's a wrong experience. It's not like it shouldn't be like this. It's not that it should be different. It's like this
Mhm.
now. I once heard a mentor once say this to me. It's like putting on the radio and being okay with whatever song comes on.
Right. Right. Well, you can become more of an observer. I think
Yeah.
that we get really attached to, as opposed to observing. I also think what can impact our emotions heavily is how we perceive an event, or how we perceive someone's attitude. Right? There's what happens in life. So there's the circumstance of what happens, and then there's this story that you create about it. And when you know that, okay, what happened is not necessarily in my control. However, the story I tell myself about what happened is in my control. So Elliott, for example, when he's getting constructive feedback, or me when I was getting unconstructive, just criticism, uh, if we perceive that as, oh my goodness, I'm not enough, they're coming after me, they're they're out to get me, that's going to be very different than having the opinion of, okay, if Elliott's hearing feedback from his boss, instead of, oh, they're out to get me or they're trying to hurt me, what if they're trying to help me? Maybe I don't like how they're saying it. Maybe I don't like the tone they're saying it. Maybe I don't like the words they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not in control of that. But I am in control of, if I sort through all this information, could it be helpful? I
Yeah.
once heard someone, I work a lot with athletes, saying, when you won't always like, right, what a coach says to you and the feedback you get. Might not always like how they say it. But since you're not in control of that, you are in control of what you extract from that conversation and how you hear it. So if you hear it as they're trying to hurt me, that's going to create a very different emotional experience than they're trying to help me.
Yeah.
And someone once said to me that played professional sports, when your coach is not giving you feedback, that's the biggest problem.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's
so
happened.
I think that perception's very much a part of the
Yeah.
emotional state we feel.
There's I think people will say it all the time, Sarah, oh, I'm open to feedback, I love feedback, but when they get it they don't love it so much. And that, like you were saying before, it's a skill too. I think that there's a skill in how you receive feedback, there's a skill in how you interpret it, there's a skill how you pull from it something that is useful. And Elliott's story, I there are a lot of clients I've worked with that have similar personalities to Elliot. The person who is very outspoken, they go for it, they're very driven, and they at times unintentionally bombard others. But clearly, there's an impact that it's having. There's an impact that it had on Kevin, for example, in the story where he is having a rough relationship with Kevin and other people, right? So
Mhm.
how could, for someone who has that kind of tendency, and I think there's pride there,
Mhm.
how would you recommend that they right some of those wrongs? How would they go about improving those relationships with the people that maybe they didn't mean to harm. They didn't mean to do it that way, but it ended up having that kind of impact.
Hmm. Impact versus intention is very different. So I could have the intention all day long that I don't want to hurt you. But if I say words and I use a tone that the impact is it clearly upset you, if I come at you and say, well, that's not what I intended. I didn't intend to hurt you. I'm not that type of person. Why would you think I would be that type of person? I'm not. You're going to walk away very different than if I say this. Oh, I did not intend to hurt you, but I can see I did.
Mm.
That's not what I meant. However, I can see you're very upset. So tell me about that and let me re explain myself. I remember somebody telling me that the great example of intent versus impact and how much us human beings, we want to be honored for the impact. We don't want to keep hearing about someone's intent. And the example was you're at the grocery store and somebody hits you from behind, hits your heel with the cart. You know how
Ugh.
much that hurts? So say that happens to you and you turn around and you look at the person and they say to you, I didn't do it on purpose. I would never purposely hit you in the back of the heel. I'm not that I wouldn't be that mean, not malicious.
Mm.
You'd be like, "What? What are you talking about?" No, you turn around and you want them to say, "Oh my goodness, sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. Sorry about that."
Right.
You want them to honor they didn't intend to. You don't need them to honor that. You're assuming they didn't intend to hurt you. You're assuming that in the grocery store. You're hoping that, but you want them to honor they did hurt you. They did
Yeah.
bump into you. That's the impact.
Yeah.
Elliott is doing intentions. I'm intending to share and communicate the way I want to. I feel justified to because he put the IT guy in his place
Right.
and didn't have any second thought about it. What he's not open to is your impact is what needs to be handled differently or needs
Yeah.
to be no, needs to be honored.
Yeah.
That's what the word
Acknowledged.
is, honored. Acknowledge, yes.
Acknowledge. If I think that grocery store analogy is a really good one. I could always make that case of, well, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't intend to do that. But that's nonsense. It really is. Whenever people say that, especially as I coach people, well, I didn't mean to do that. Uh, I just share with them they're not taking ownership. They're not taking ownership of the impact
Yes.
they're having on others. And so you could use that excuse all the time and make yourself out to be, well, I can't control how they receive it. I can't control blah, 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 blah. I'm going to just do it my way. Well, you're going to have a tough time in this world then. If you are going to
Yes.
only focus in on this was my intent and how other people are impacted, that's not my responsibility.
That's up
That's
to you.
right. It's just
Yeah.
nonsense. Now with Elliot, and this is something that can come up, which is okay, he goes into or after, let's say he speaks with you, Sarah, he goes to Kevin, he goes to others, and he tends to or he approaches it where he wants to acknowledge the impact.
Right.
And he's going about it with compassion. He's doing it the right way.
That's his end
What
result now. Compassion. He's like, you know what I'm
right,
gonna do is compassion.
right.
Beyond
That's
my
what he said.
emotions, beyond my
Yeah.
justification.
He's learning, right? He's learning this
Yeah.
process.
Right.
But let's say it isn't received well. Let's say he does
Mhm.
apologize and the person's clearly not willing to accept it. What then?
Mhm. Unfortunately, it's not up to you how other people react or whether they accept your apology. I do believe you do it though for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you have to look in your mirror. It has to be your thoughts at 4 a.m. in your head, and you have to be proud of the choices you've chosen to make, regardless of people's reaction and acceptance of it. And I do believe that what you say and do says a lot about you, and how people, what they say and how they act says a lot about them. And you never know in time if over time they would say, okay, well, actions speak louder than words. Okay, so you said sorry, but maybe I just want to, I want to see this out.
Hmm.
You know, because some people need a little bit more time. They need a little bit more time to see it, the change.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you said you do it for yourself. That is
Yeah,
that
you
is the
have
truth.
to.
You have
Because you're
to.
doing it,
That's a
you're doing it to honor the person, but ultimately you're doing it to say, look, I was out of character. Now
yeah.
I see the impact, and it's not worth me trying to be right about everything and lose connection. I remember there was a show or a podcast or something I was reading. I loved the title. It was called Choose Being Right or Connection. Both can't always exist in the same space,
Hmm. Yeah.
especially in relationships. So you're either going to fight tooth and nail that you're right, because your brain is telling you always you're right. I mean, this is most couples. Like, well, what I'm saying is right. I need you. If I agree with you, then we're going to both be wrong.
Well,
Someone's going to be right, and it's clearly me.
the motto I use there, it's one of the principles I share on leadership, and that is to focus on what's right, let go of who's right. So
Oh yeah, so that yeah.
it's what's right. What's right is to have compassion. What's right is to approach people as human beings and honor their emotions. Who's right is not nearly as important. And I think that it's a common, or it's a very natural human, uh, I guess, pattern to want to always be right. And then
Mm-hmm.
we also have the other angle of looking at this with Elliott, which is, all right, he goes back to work. Let's say a few months goes by, but he has his clients' needs, and he wants to be sure that he's able to do his job well. And there are other teams that he has to work with. And he says to you, Sara, but other people, they're just lazy. They're just not doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
I need them to be as on top of things as I am in order for the client to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to him there? Like when he's
Mm-hmm.
saying, okay, I am attempting to approach this with compassion, but they're still not doing their job. Okay. How do I deal with
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there's layers to that, because I think that that happens. I think most people listening are like, "Oh, I have a team member like that. You know, they're not pulling their weight, and the
Right.
project we're supposed to work on together, they're not doing, and then it creates this whole." And I do think you have to look at perception again. Say, okay, what is the perception I have of this person? Like, have they done something and now I'm perceiving it, or they didn't do something and now I'm coming up with a story. They're lazy, they're not involved, they don't care. Like, what's the story I'm creating about this person? I got to really look at that. And then could I shift that? Like, is it because they don't care, or could there be something else going on in their life and they're distracted? Could and this slight shift of perception all of a sudden has you totally have a new emotional experience, because if you and I are working together on something and you're not getting back to my emails in what I think's timely. I mean, we can have a whole different conversation about expectations, because that's another thing that needs to be communicated. So my expectation is it should be X, Y, and Z, and yours is it should be this, that, and the other. When it comes to timing, we're going to feel very different emotions, because I'm going to be expecting something that you have no idea that I'm expecting. That's the timeline. So there's that. But then so you didn't get to my timeline, you didn't get to my email. If I create the story that you don't care, you are lazy and uncooperative, I'm really irritated by you.
Mm,
And every time I see you, I'm more irritated, because once your brain has a focal point, has decided a judgment about someone or something,
yeah.
it finds more evidence for why you're right. Remember, your brain loves to be right. So it'll say, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, look at what he's doing now. He's so irritating. Only an irritating person would wear that outfit. Like,
Yeah.
it can keep going on and on and on, because now you're focused on it. You might find
Yeah.
more evidence to it. So then you also are not able to connect with that person properly. So if you can't connect with your colleagues or people in your life properly, there's going to be a very strong lack of motivation, productivity, and connection. So then we go over to, what if I saw it as, oh, maybe you're overwhelmed, maybe. Then I would feel compassion and I would ask you, Jay, we have a timeline and I have an expectation that this is going to be done and it wasn't. Is there something that I could help you with?
Yeah. I do think we could have, and maybe we do have another conversation at some point around expectation, because I do think it's a topic that is so
Mhm.
valuable for people to know. First, be clear on what your expectation is. Second, be clear on how you communicate that expectation, and then be able to understand what others' expectation is, and to do so all of
Mhm.
this without attachment either. That's the other part. Now, the way you're describing this, I once heard it said this way. Tell me what you think. It's like, I see a person and I also see this huge file cabinet behind them of all the things they've ever done. And I am projecting everything within that file cabinet onto them in this moment, where,
Mhm.
and that's the approach that we could take, where we fall into that pattern of that judgment that's been made. Or I can look at you with present moment freshness, drop the cabinet, and be able to assume the most positive intent, assume that there could be different things that are happening in your life the way you described it, and then be able to work with you without this huge file cabinet of all the things you've ever done to me in our time of knowing each other.
Right. And I
Yeah.
mean, and then, absolutely. And then we also, because I want to also add this part in there, I think is really important, that when you learn pieces about people that don't vibe with you, or that healthy boundaries are important. So there's also, you're not just gazing over. It's not like you're just saying, oh well, all your wrongdoings, and but really you did hurt me, but I'm just letting all that. It's, you are just making a conscious decision about being aware how you are perceiving someone, knowing that that can shift. You can focus on the things that irritate you, or you can focus on the one thing you're grateful for about that person. Both still exist. The things
Yeah.
that irritate you about that person and the one
Yeah.
thing they do well that you're grateful for exist at the same time. It's, which one are you pointing your brain at? That's
Yeah.
all it is.
Yep.
And knowing that there are healthy boundaries, that you have a boundary of what you will or will not accept, is important.
Mm-hmm.
But even in the world, there's always going to be good and bad, right and wrong, happiness, anger. Which are you focusing on? Your brain is a powerful, powerful tool. Don't let it go wild with its focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might not choose all your thoughts, but you definitely choose the thought you look at. It's like clouds in the sky. You don't choose all those clouds, but you can choose the cloud you stare at. So
Mm.
letting those other thoughts, oh, hi, thought, oh, yeah, okay, there. But no, I'm going to focus on this thought. Like, this is a powerful perception shift that you can have, that then changes your emotional experience, then changes your physical experience, since emotions impact physical, and then changes your behavior. All because you shifted your perception, not because that person changed
Yeah.
necessarily, or because the
Right.
circumstance changed.
Right. Well,
I did this
there's
with the
so,
relationship with my dad and I.
yeah.
Like,
Well, there's
he
so
didn't.
many people that I speak with that they think that, oh, I have to either change my environment, I have to change my job. It's my manager that's the problem. And in reality, when they do the work, they realize all I really need to do is shift my perception. That's what I needed to do. And when I did that,
Mhm,
I was in the right job. I'm working with the right manager. It's just the way you were interpreting it, the perception that you had, that was creating the problem. So
mhm,
I want to paint this picture for you. And I think we can close with this, which is, all right, you're on stage, you're speaking to a large crowd. Elliott's in the crowd. He's there.
mhm,
And he's inspired by what you're sharing. And you know how after your presentation, you get to speak with the people in the audience. And Elliott comes up to you and he tells you his story, the story that you
mhm.
know. And you just have just this little bit of time to give him just some final words of advice. What would you say to him there in person after you hear his story?
Mhm. Mm-hmm. It's a big one because there's so many things I feel like I would say to him, but I would say if you want better relationships and connection in your life, and everyone wants to work with and people they feel seen, validated, and heard. And I'm going to assume from his story, the people around him don't feel seen, validated, or heard. That the first place, in order to honor somebody else and their emotions and where they're at, for in this instance, his colleagues, he has to start within himself. I bet there is a good chance that he's really hard on himself. He suppresses the emotions and avoids them as opposed to sitting with them, looking at them and moving through them. He's not compassionate or empathetic to himself when he makes a mistake. He attaches his achievements to his worth. I am worthy when I. So I would say the best work you can do is honor yourself. Every time you're feeling an emotion that feels super uncomfortable, I want you just to start with it's okay to feel it. Just literally lean in, honor your own self. You cannot honor somebody else or find these connections with other people until you find them within yourself, because there will always be that disconnect. If you don't have empathy for yourself, how can you have empathy for other people?
Yeah.
So starting right down with centering yourself, and it's okay to feel, it's okay that I'm on this journey of improvement. It's okay that and really working on your relationship with you. And then
Beautifully said. Yeah.
outcome will be connection to others. It will
Yeah.
just be the natural outcome.
It'll be the byproduct. Well
It
said,
will be the
Sarah.
byproduct.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for sharing these insights and working through this example with Elliott and being able to diagnose it so well, and then be able to offer some incredible advice. For anyone who wants to reach out to Sara on Instagram, it is at I am Sara Westbrook, and it's without the H, Sara, and or sarawestbrook.com. And of course, LinkedIn, that's where you and I connected. You can find Sara there. She does keynotes and workshops for corporate companies, corporations, for educators, teachers, parents, athletes, and she's wonderful. I've seen your clips. I've seen you on stage, and you have an incredible energy about you. And obviously, the crowds always respond due to just the kind of incredible insights that you're sharing. So, Sara, thank you so much
Thank
again for
you.
taking time
Well,
out of your day.
I appreciate you. I mean, those are just accolades. Like, just thank you, just really. And I have to say, this is something that I'm working on too daily. I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I don't believe life is about perfection, but I do believe it's about reflection and redirection and progress. So thank you also for the work you do, because you're making a huge difference as well for so many people's lives when it comes to being on a journey of growth. And it's not an easy journey, but it's a very rewarding one.
I appreciate you saying that, Sara. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I got to tell you, this was one of the most difficult conversations to synthesize down to just 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways. I struggled here, but I did my best because there was so much goodness in that conversation. There were so many insights. So I'm going to give you what I feel are the best nuggets to take away, but there may be more. Feel free to listen back. But here are the 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways. Insight number 1. What's fueling your choice? In whatever decision you're making. Is it anger that's fueling the decision? Is it emotion? Or is it respect for yourself and for others? Are you fueled by justifying previous behavior? What's in the driver's seat? That, to me, I think is a really, really profound question you can ask yourself when you're interacting with other people. Second insight, intention versus impact. I love the shopping cart analogy in the grocery store, where I hit somebody with the shopping cart, it hits their ankle. I wouldn't say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I would say, I didn't mean to do that, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that hurt. That's the appropriate response, right? So if somebody is impacted negatively by something you did, even if you didn't intend to, honor the impact, acknowledge the impact. Third insight, when someone gives you feedback, what are you extracting from it? Are you under the impression that this person is trying to hurt you or help you? Even if you don't like the way it was delivered, even if you don't like the words they used, can you still get value from that feedback? So that's a shift in perception. Are you projecting something onto the person who's giving you feedback and just trying to find more evidence towards a judgment you've already made? Or are you simply pulling out and extracting something of value? That's a choice you can make in how you receive your feedback. Actionable takeaways. Number 1, create the end result of who you want to be as a person. This has to be character-based. Choose 1 or 2 traits that you feel you're aiming for. Just like she said in that, if you're playing a game, you want to know how to win the game. You want to know what you're after, right? In the same way, set that target of who you want to be, and then your mind will be able to come up with the plan of how to get there. Actionable takeaway number 2, name it to tame it. If you're experiencing some disruptive emotion, name it, acknowledge it. When you do so, you are now able to observe it objectively and not feel so caught by it. Name it to tame it. Number 3, when needing to apologize for the impact that you had on someone, yes, you're doing so because you want to right a wrong, but you're also doing it for yourself, to honor the kind of character, the kind of person you want to be aligned with those values. Another way of putting this is, you're not apologizing to get the reaction out of the other person that they accept your apology. That's out of your control. If that's what's fueling the apology, you're going about it all wrong. Instead, what fuels your apology is, hey, I want to make a right wrong, or I want to make a wrong right, and I'm doing so for me because I feel like this is more aligned with who I want to be. Join us in our next episode on Friday. We're going to have another one of our short episodes where I'm going to walk you through a Stoic philosophy that is very much related to what Sara and I were talking towards the end of our conversation. And it has to do with reality versus expectation. And I'm going to give you a formula for happiness. It's a formula that I've designed over the years. I've shared it when I went speaking, and I've shared it in my coaching business at times with clients, where you can apply it not only as a means to cultivate more happiness, but it will also equate to greater resilience. Until next time, thank you for listening.